Now then, Vinyl Monkey here again. This week, two letters I and J. Reason being, I've only got one album behind here beginning with the letter I. Or I thought I had, till somebody pointed out to me last night, well, what about Iggy Pop? And of course, yeah, I've got him classified under P, but yeah, Jimmy Osterberg, where would you put him? And I suppose classifying your LPs and whether they're alphabetical and how they're alphabetical or chronological or genre or whatever, a whole debate. But anyway, the way I've got them, I've only got one under the letter I, and I didn't want to talk about that for the whole 15 minutes. But let's start with it, and this is Janis Between the Lines from 1973, and I think I've put 50 odd or so albums up over the last couple of months as I've been doing this channel, and this is the first album I've held up that I can honestly say I'm not that keen on. But having said that, just because I'm not that keen on it doesn't mean it's not a great album. It's certainly recognised as one of the classic singer-songwriter albums. There is no doubt in Janis talent as a singer and songwriter. I think it's just for me that it's a bit overdone, overproduced. There's lots of horns and strings. They're all arranged by this marvellously named guy, credited on the back Ron Frangipani. He's worked with lots and lots of top people. But I think Janis is best where she's singing sort of sensitive songs with maybe a more pared back sort of sound. And for me, this is just a bit over the top, and sometimes Janis seems to have to compete with the band and the orchestra and everything to get her voice heard, and it makes her sound a little bit like the musicals on occasions in this album. And although I've got a very eclectic taste in music, as you might have gathered by now if you've watched a few of these, musicals are one of the areas of music that I really struggle with. So it is recognised as a great album. There are some great songs, but just not really my cup of tea. But if you're going to listen to something off this, listen to the one you're probably most familiar with, At 17. And I would urge you to go to the version that was on the old Grey Whistle test back in the 70s, where Janis is with a much smaller band, and you get the beautiful voice and the sensitive, sad lyrics on that. So that's Janis Between the Lines, 1973. Then moving on to the letter J, and I've got to apologise here. I did say we're going to tour through the nether regions of this collection, avoiding, by and large, avoiding the real big guns, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the Zeppelins, the Pink Floyds, etc., and looking around maybe some of the other corners of the collection. But here we are, today we've got two of the big guns in the letter J, starting with one of the big bands from the early 70s, Jethro, Tull. This is Benefit from 1970. This was Tull's third album. I've got all six of their, I've got their first six albums here behind me on vinyl. So this was Stand Up, Benefit, Aqualung, Thick as a Brick, Passion Play. Out of all of those, I think this one is my favourite. I've listened to all six of them again this week just to check out how I feel about them, and I've confirmed that this is definitely my favourite, and that's because I think it feels more natural. It feels less contrived. I think somehow Aqualung and Thick as a Brick are a bit forced. I think Aqualung was fantastic when it was questioning organised religion, and there's me having been brought up in a Catholic sort of school and everything, and yeah, great. But these days it sounds a little bit dated, a bit contrived, a little bit schoolyardish, if you like. And but this one, I think, seen the band really maturing from a sort of blues orientated style to a much more diverse style that was their own style. There was nobody else sounded like Jethro Tull, and that wasn't just the flute. I think Martin Barr's guitar and the general sort of blend of folk, rock, blues, proggy sort of style was a style all of their own, and I think it's best personified on this album. So this is my favourite of theirs, Benefit 1970. Then the other big gun under the letter J, Elton John. This is Honky Chateau from 1972. Gets off to a cracking start with Honky Cat, great song. Then there's a song called Mellow, lovely song with a beautiful organ solo by Elton John. And then on the last track on side one, Rocket Man, which I absolutely love that single, Rocket Man. You know, the trip to Mars and the ordinariness and loneliness of the astronaut life, beautiful. And then on side two, maybe one of my favourite Elton John songs, and if you're gonna listen to one off this album, I'd really recommend you try and look up Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters from side two of Honky Chateau. Beautiful song about New York. I guess maybe Elton's first visit to New York. But this album really hangs together. I think it's one where the band really shine as a band. Nigel Olsson, Dean Murray, Davy Johnson all come through, and it feels like a sort of band album and a singular piece of work. Maybe unlike a couple of their more lauded albums like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which probably most of the critics would have as number one, and Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboys, of course. But I think this is an album I enjoy listening from sort of front to back more than those others. So that's Honky Chateau, Elton John, 1972. And then the next album is from 1979, and this is Linton Kwesi Johnson, Forces of Victory. Linton Kwesi Johnson came across to England from Jamaica when he was a young child, early 60s I think, yeah, about 1960 or so. Lived in Brixton, became a poet, set most of his poetry to reggae, dub reggae music. He writes and performs his poetry in a sort of Jamaican patois. And it's beautiful stuff, and it's hard hitting, and it's the context of this album that made me pick it up. This is 1979, and I suppose as a white working class lad living in a monocultural town like Hartlepool, you know, as growing up, I was conscious that racism was almost, you know, it was an insidious sort of almost permanent low-lying undercurrent in the town. You just lived with it. You sort of, it was there. It was very, very common. But it didn't hit you in the face. You didn't experience it firsthand as a white working class lad necessarily. You just sort of were mired in it, in those sorts of attitudes. But in the mid-late 70s, I started going to London a lot, maybe once a month, football gigs, drinking, and I had an uncle who lived in a council flat in the Elephant Castle, used to stay down there, and I was shocked as I got more interested in politics and punk rock and the like. I was shocked by the level of racism and the overt, brutal horror of racism in London. And you know, for example, we used to drink in a pub in the Elephant Castle, which was frequented by young coppers from a nearby police training school, and they would openly brag and they would love to brag to anybody they didn't know, like strangers, northerners like us, about how they would go along the Brixton Road and fit up and beat up young black lads, plant cannabis on them, arrest them, charge them, and it was just a bit of sport for them, and it was absolutely horrific. And it's in that sort of context that Kwesi Johnson writes his and performs his poetry. And yeah, if you listen to this album, I would urge you to do so, and take Sonny's Letter as an example, but you could take any of the tracks. But if you listen to Sonny's Letter and it fails to make you angry, and especially all the more angry and depressed that we've got an overt racist in number 10 Downing Street at the moment, then yeah, if it doesn't make you angry, well, I don't know what's wrong. But I'd urge you to listen to it. Forces of Victory, Linton Kwesi Johnson, 1979. And then the last album, this is Psycho Candy, by the Jesus and Mary Chain from 1985. And the Jesus and Mary Chain, they'll be in the Reed brothers, they'll be early 60s, a couple of years younger than me, but like me, they'd got into punk in the 70s. And they'd become disillusioned and by the sort of crap that was coming out in music in the early 80s, the sort of new romantics and bad hair and synthesized synthetic pap that was dominating the music charts. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back, I read once, was when they used to, like me, religiously read the NME, and one day on the front cover the NME was highlighting Kid Creole and the Coconuts, and they just thought, that's it, that's enough, this is crap, let's form our own band. And this is what they did, and this is a reaction to that crap, and it's a stunning reaction. The critics are quite right where they say this band wear their influences right on their sleeve, and their influences are clearly the Beach Boys and the Velvet Underground. So you've got this might be difficult for some people, it's distorted guitars, there's loads of echo and reverb, sort of white noise type thing. Sometimes it's hard to pick out the melody and harmony in the noise, but it is there. And it's as if the Velvet Underground are up front with their amps turned up and their guitars all distorted and maybe out of tune, and the Beach Boys are in the back just struggling to be heard. But it's really good stuff. Give it a chance. It's a great reaction to the depressing early 80s music scene. This is the Jesus and Mary Chain, Psycho Candy from 1985. Okay, so that was